Jessica Carter froze halfway up the stairs, the laundry basket trembling in her hands. Her husband's voice carried clearly from the bedroom, firm, steady, and nothing like the weak, pained tone he used with her. "Don't worry about it," Ethan was saying. "She's completely clueless." Jessica's heart pounded against her ribs. For 4 years, she had climbed these stairs hundreds of times carrying his meals, his medications, his clean clothes, all while nurturing hopes for his recovery that he had apparently never needed. But that revelation would come later. For now, let's go back to where it all began. 4 years earlier, Jessica Carter had been the marketing director at one of Chicago's most prestigious advertising firms. At 30, she had everything: a thriving career, a beautiful home in Lincoln Park, and a marriage to Ethan Carter, the charming investment banker who'd swept her off her feet 6 years before. "You're going to crush this presentation," Ethan had said that morning, adjusting his tie in their bedroom mirror while Jessica gathered her portfolio. "The Henderson account is as good as yours. If I land this, we're one step closer to that trip to Italy," Jessica replied, the excitement evident in her voice. They had been planning the trip for their 5th anniversary: Rome, Florence, the Amalfi Coast, a celebration of their success and their future. "I'll make reservations at Bellini's for tonight to celebrate in advance," Ethan promised, kissing her goodbye. That was the last normal day of Jessica's life. The call came at 3:47 p.m. Just as she was wrapping up her successful presentation, Ethan's car had hit a patch of black ice, skidded off the road and wrapped around a tree. The hospital needed her there immediately. The next weeks passed in a blur of white hospital corridors, somber-faced doctors, and terms like spinal cord injury and partial paralysis. Ethan had survived, but the doctors were uncertain if he would ever walk again. "He's going to need extensive care," Dr. Mitchell had explained gently. "Physical therapy, occupational therapy, possibly home modifications. His recovery will be a marathon, not a sprint." "I'll do whatever it takes," Jessica had promised, holding Ethan's limp hand as he lay sedated in the hospital bed. "Whatever he needs." Okay. 4 years later, Jessica barely recognized her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The confident marketing executive had vanished, replaced by a hollow-eyed woman with premature worry lines etched around her mouth. Her once fashionable clothes had given way to practical, washable outfits suitable for caregiving. Her career was a distant memory, sacrificed to become Ethan's full-time caretaker. "Jessica, where are my pain meds?" Ethan's voice cut through her moment of reflection. "It's past time." "Coming," she called, automatically reaching for the pill organizer she'd prepared on Sunday night. 4 years of routine had trained her body to respond without thought. In the living room, Ethan sat in his wheelchair by the window, staring out at the street with that familiar expression of bitter resignation. He didn't look up when she entered. "Physical therapy appointment is at 2. Don't be late," he said as she handed him the pills and a glass of water. "I know," Jessica replied quietly. "I have it written down. And remember to ask about the new exercises, the ones for spinal cord recovery." Jessica nodded, though he wasn't looking at her. "I will." She'd heard about these exercises 6 months ago from an article she'd found online. Ethan had been dismissive then, but recently he'd started mentioning them repeatedly, as if the idea had been his all along. "Don't just stand there," he snapped. "I need breakfast, and make sure the eggs aren't runny this time." Jessica retreated to the kitchen, gripping the counter until her knuckles went white. When had Ethan become this person? The man she'd married had been ambitious but kind, driven but considerate. This bitter, demanding stranger was someone she barely recognized. The accident had changed him, that's what she told herself. The trauma, the pain, the loss of independence. Who wouldn't be angry at the world? Jessica had read countless articles about personality changes after serious injuries. She understood, she empathized, she endured, as she prepared his breakfast: eggs, not runny, whole wheat toast, no butter, and black coffee, 1 sugar. Jessica's phone buzzed with a text from Maya, her best friend from college, and the only person who still remembered the woman Jessica used to be. Coffee later. You sound stressed in your messages. Jessica glanced toward the living room where Ethan was watching the financial news, his face set in a permanent scowl. She typed back quickly, "Yes, I need to get out of here." "Oh, Jesus, Jess, you look exhausted," Maya said as they sat in the corner of Lakeside Coffee, away from the afternoon crowd. At 40, Maya Wilson radiated the confidence of a woman comfortable in her skin, successful criminal defense attorney, divorced but happily dating, and fiercely protective of her friends. "Thanks," Jessica replied with a tired smile. "Just what every woman wants to hear." "I'm serious." Maya reached across the table and squeezed Jessica's hand. "When's the last time you did something for yourself? A haircut, a massage, hell, even a nap?" Jessica tried to remember. I don't know. It's hard to leave him alone for long." "What about respite care or asking Rebecca to help?" A bitter laugh escaped Jessica. "Rebecca helps by telling me everything I'm doing wrong, and respite care costs money we don't have." The truth was that Ethan controlled their finances completely now. Every penny accounted for, every expense questioned. Jessica received an allowance for groceries and household items. Anything else required his permission, which was rarely granted. "This isn't healthy, Jess. For either of you." "He needs me," Jessica said automatically, the words programmed after years of Rebecca's guilt trips. "What about what you need?" The question hung in the air. When had Jessica stopped thinking about what she needed? "I made vows, Maya, in sickness and in health." "Vows work both ways," Maya countered, her attorney's precision evident in her argument. "Is he honoring his commitment to love and cherish you?" Jessica thought about that morning's interaction, the constant criticism, the way Ethan looked at her like she was nothing more than an inconvenience. "It's hard for him," she said weakly. "He's lost so much." Maya reached across the table and covered Jessica's hand with hers. "You've lost things too, Jess. Your career, your dreams, your sense of self. That matters too." Tears pricked Jessica's eyes. She blinked them back quickly. Crying was a luxury she couldn't afford. Ethan hated when she cried. "I should go," she said, checking her watch. "He'll need his afternoon medication soon." "Jess, wait." Maya's grip tightened on her hand. "Promise me something. If things get worse, if you need help, you'll call me, day or night." Jessica nodded, though they both knew she wouldn't. She'd been drowning for so long. She'd forgotten how to reach for a lifeline. As Jessica pulled into their driveway, she noticed a sleek silver Mercedes parked outside Rebecca's car. Her mother-in-law had arrived early. Of course. Through the living room window, Jessica could see Rebecca's animated gestures as she talked to Ethan, her perfectly manicured hands cutting through the air as her mouth moved rapidly. Jessica sat in her car for another minute, gathering strength. Then she grabbed her purse and walked inside, putting on the smile she'd perfected over 4 years of practice. "Rebecca, you're early. What a nice surprise." Rebecca Carter turned toward Jessica, her sharp eyes taking inventory. At 65, Rebecca maintained the polished appearance of Chicago's North Shore elite, expensive highlights in her blonde bob, subtle but perfect makeup, and clothing that whispered rather than shouted about its cost. "Jessica, dear, you look tired. Are you taking care of yourself?" The question sounded caring, but Jessica heard the subtext. "Are you taking care of my son properly?" "I'm fine," Jessica said. "Just busy with Ethan's appointments and therapy." "Of course. Such a devoted wife." Rebecca smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Ethan was just telling me how much he appreciates everything you do." Jessica looked at Ethan. He stared at the television, his jaw set in that familiar line of irritation. She doubted very much that appreciation had been the topic of their conversation. "Can I get you some tea?" Jessica offered. "That would be lovely. And Jessica, we need to talk about Ethan's long-term care plan." Jessica's stomach dropped. Long-term care plan. That sounded ominous. In the kitchen, she fumbled with the kettle, her hands shaking slightly. Through the thin walls, she could hear Rebecca and Ethan talking in low voices. She caught fragments, not sustainable. Other options. What's best for you? The kettle whistled, sharp and urgent. Jessica poured the tea with mechanical precision, her mind racing. What were they planning when she returned with the tea tray? Rebecca had moved to the chair beside Ethan's wheelchair. They looked like conspirators. "Sit down, dear," Rebecca said, patting the couch across from them. "We have something important to discuss." Jessica perched on the edge of the cushion, every muscle tense. "Jessica," Rebecca began, "we've been thinking about Ethan's future. His needs are only going to increase as time goes on." "His needs are fine," Jessica said quickly. "I can handle." "Of course you can, dear. But should you have to? You're still young. You could remarry, have children, build a new life." The words hit like ice water. "I don't want a new life. I want this one. With Ethan." Ethan finally looked at her, and for a split second, Jessica thought she saw something flicker in his eyes. Guilt, regret, but it vanished so quickly she might have imagined it. "There are excellent care facilities," Rebecca continued. "Places where Ethan would get professional help around the clock." "Facilities," Jessica's voice cracked. "You want to put him in a home?" "I want what's best for my son," Rebecca said sharply. "And right now, that might not be struggling at home with limited resources." Limited resources, limited wife, limited everything. "We're managing fine," Jessica insisted. Rebecca's smile was patronizing. "Are you, dear Ethan mentioned you've been crying a lot lately, that you seem overwhelmed." Jessica stared at Ethan. When had he seen her cry? She always waited until she was alone, usually in the shower where the water could hide her tears. "I'm not overwhelmed," she said. "Of course not," Rebecca soothed. "But think about it. Jessica, really think. Would Ethan be happier with professional, or would you be happier with the freedom to rebuild your life?" The conversation continued for another hour, but Jessica barely heard it. All she could think about was Ethan watching her, cataloging her moments of weakness, reporting back to his mother like she was some failing employee. After Rebecca left, the house fell into heavy silence. Ethan had retreated to his bedroom for his afternoon nap. Jessica stood in the kitchen, mechanically washing the teacups, her mind spinning. You could remarry, have children, build a new life. The words should have felt like an escape route. Instead, they felt like a betrayal of her vows, of the love they used to share, of the man Ethan used to be before the accident stole pieces of both of them. As Jessica dried the last cup and put it away, she noticed something odd. Ethan's cell phone lay on the kitchen counter. He was usually obsessive about keeping it with him at all times. Jessica hesitated, then picked it up. The screen was locked, but a notification showed a text message from someone named A. "Miss you. Can't wait to see you tomorrow." Jessica's heart stuttered. It was probably nothing. A friend? A therapist? A wrong number. She set the phone down exactly where she'd found it and busied herself with preparing dinner, ignoring the uneasy feeling growing in her stomach. That night, as she lay in the guest bedroom where she'd been sleeping for the past year, Ethan had insisted it was better that way. Less chance of disturbing his sleep, Jessica found herself staring at the ceiling, replaying the day's events. Something wasn't right. The text message, Rebecca's unexpected visit, the talk of care facilities, and new lives. It all felt connected somehow, pieces of a puzzle she couldn't quite see. Jessica turned onto her side, pulling the blanket tight around her shoulders. She was being paranoid. Stress and exhaustion were making her imagine conspiracies where there were none. Ethan was injured, bitter, difficult, but he was still her husband. He wouldn't betray her, would he? Over the next few weeks, Jessica began noticing more inconsistencies. Small things at first: objects moved in the house when she'd been out, missing hours in Ethan's schedule, phone calls that ended abruptly when she entered the room. Then larger things: unexplained withdrawals from their joint checking account, medical appointments that Ethan insisted on attending alone, the faint scent of an unfamiliar perfume on his clothes. Do you know someone named Alex or Alexandra? Jessica asked casually one evening as she folded laundry in the living room. Ethan's head snapped up from his tablet. What? No? Why? I thought I heard you mention that name on the phone. You're mistaken, he said flatly. I don't know anyone by that name. But Jessica had seen the flash of panic in his eyes before he composed himself. He was lying. That night, she waited until Ethan was asleep, then crept into the living room where he'd left his tablet charging. She knew his password, or thought she did. When she tried to enter it, the device refused her access. He'd changed it. Jessica sat in the dark living room, the blank tablet screen reflecting her troubled expression. What was Ethan hiding? And why did she feel like she was the one doing something wrong by trying to find out? Have you considered that Ethan might be... Maya hesitated, choosing her words carefully over their coffee the following week. Cheating on me, Jessica finished for her. How he can barely walk. But even as she said it, Jessica knew it wasn't entirely true. Ethan's mobility had improved over the years. He could stand for short periods with support. He could transfer himself from his wheelchair to other seats. And sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, his movements seemed less labored, more confident. I'm not saying that's what's happening, Maya backtracked. Just that his behavior sounds off. Everything's been off since the accident. Jessica sighed. I don't know what normal is anymore. Then maybe it's time to find out, Maya suggested gently. For your own peace of mind. Jessica traced the rim of her coffee cup with her finger. How? You could check his phone records, or hire someone to look into his activities when you're not around. A private investigator? To spy on my disabled husband, Jessica shook her head. That's ridiculous. Is it? You've devoted 4 years of your life to caring for him. Don't you deserve to know if he's being honest with you? Jessica didn't have an answer for that. The truth was, she was afraid of what she might discover. As long as she didn't know for certain, she could maintain the fiction that their marriage was simply going through a difficult period, that Ethan was just struggling with his limitations, that things would eventually improve. But deep down, in a place she rarely allowed herself to visit, Jessica knew something was very wrong. Thursday afternoon felt different. The house was quieter than usual, and Ethan had been uncharacteristically pleasant at lunch, almost chatty. He'd even thanked her for the sandwich, which hadn't happened in months. Jessica should have been happy about the change. Instead, it made her uneasy. She was folding laundry in the hallway when she heard voices. At first, she thought the television was too loud. Ethan often cranked up the volume during his afternoon shows. But as she climbed the stairs with his clean clothes, the voices became clearer, and one of them was definitely Ethan's. Jessica froze on the landing. Ethan was talking to someone, not the television. This was a conversation. But how was that possible? His phone was downstairs on the kitchen counter. She'd seen it there when she brought him lunch. Don't worry about it, Ethan was saying, his voice carrying through the closed bedroom door. She's completely clueless. Jessica's heart skipped. Who is he talking to? She crept closer to the door, the laundry basket trembling in her arms. 4 years of playing the helpless husband, Ethan continued, and there was amusement in his voice. Actual amusement. You should see her running around like a scared little mouse, doing everything I tell her. She's just a free maid. Nothing more. The basket slipped from Jessica's numb fingers. Clean clothes scattered across the hallway floor, but she barely noticed. Her entire world had narrowed to the voice beyond that door. The lawyer says 4 more years and we'll have everything locked up tight, Ethan continued. Abandonment laws work in my favor. If I can prove she can't handle my care, that she's unstable, I get to keep the house, the accounts, everything. And you know what the best part is? Jessica pressed her ear to the door, her pulse thundering. She actually believes I can't walk. God, you should see her face when she's helping me into bed at night. All that guilt and pity. It's almost too easy. The words hit Jessica like physical blows. Can't walk. Almost too easy. I know, Ethan said, his voice softer now. 2 more months and you can move in. We just have to be patient a little longer. Let her dig her own grave." There was a pause. Then Ethan laughed. Actually laughed. And the sound made Jessica's stomach turn. "Trust me, Alex, by the time I'm done with her, Jessica won't know what hit her." Jessica's legs gave out. She slid down the wall, sitting in a heap among the scattered clothes. 4 years of sacrificing everything, and it was all a lie. She pressed her hand over her mouth to keep from screaming. Ethan was talking again, but the words sounded far away, like she was hearing them through water. Something about timelines and legal procedures and making sure she looked unstable. "She's just a free maid." The phrase played on repeat in Jessica's head. A free maid. 4 years of her life. And that's all she was to him. Jessica didn't know how long she sat there. Eventually, Ethan's voice stopped. She heard movement in the room. Footsteps. Footsteps. Panic shot through her. She scrambled to gather the clothes, shoving them back into the basket with shaking hands. By the time she heard the doorknob turn, Jessica was standing again, trying to look normal. The door opened. Ethan appeared in his wheelchair, looking perfectly composed. "Jessica, what are you doing up here?" His voice was back to that familiar tone, tired, slightly irritated. The voice of a man who couldn't use his legs. "Bringing your laundry," she managed. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. He studied her face. "You look pale. Are you feeling okay?" "I'm fine, just tired." "Maybe you should rest. I can manage on my own for a while." The irony was so sharp it nearly cut her in half. He could manage. He could manage perfectly fine. "I'll just put these away," she said, gesturing to the basket. "Later. Go rest. Doctor's orders." He smiled then, the same smile that used to make her heart flutter when they were dating. Now it looked like a mask. Jessica nodded and headed for the guest room. She closed the door and sank onto the bed. Her hands were still shaking. Her mind kept replaying Ethan's words, each one a fresh wound. "She's completely clueless. Just a free maid. She actually believes I can't walk." How long had this been going on? Was he faking from the beginning? Had the accident been real at all? Jessica thought back to those early days in the hospital, the doctors explaining his injuries, the prognosis, the long road ahead. They'd seemed genuine. The x-rays, the MRIs, the consultations with specialists. But memories could be manipulated. Medical records could be falsified, especially if someone had the right connections, the right motivation. Her phone was in her pocket, with trembling fingers. Jessica pulled it out and texted Maya, "Can you come over, emergency?" Her response came back immediately. "On my way." Jessica stared at the ceiling and tried to process the magnitude of what she'd discovered. Her husband was not paralyzed. He was planning to divorce her and take everything. And there was someone else. Alex had to be Alexandra Peterson, the physical therapist who'd worked with Ethan in the early days. She'd been so attentive, so caring. Jessica had actually been grateful for her dedication. Another piece fell into place, the phone calls that came when Jessica was out running errands. The way Ethan's mood would improve after certain appointments. The mysterious improvement in his attitude on days when Alexandra was scheduled to visit. She'd stopped coming about a year ago. Ethan had said he'd progressed as far as he could with her methods. But what if she'd never really stopped coming? What if they'd just gotten better at hiding it? A sound from downstairs broke through Jessica's thoughts. The front door opening and closing. Ethan calling out, "Jessica, Maya's here." Jessica heard their voices in the living room. Maya's bright greeting. Ethan's charming response. He'd always been good with her friends. They all thought he was such a devoted husband, bearing his disability with grace and humor. If only they knew. Jessica splashed cold water on her face and went downstairs. Maya was perched on the edge of the couch, her purse clutched in her lap. She took one look at Jessica and her face changed. "Jess, what's wrong?" Ethan was watching them both, his expression carefully neutral. "She's been feeling under the weather," he said. "I told her to rest, but you know how she is, always pushing herself too hard." The concern in his voice was perfect. If Jessica hadn't heard what she'd heard upstairs, she would have believed it completely. Maybe some fresh air would help, Maya suggested. We could take a walk around the block. Great idea, Ethan said. I'll be fine here. Take your time. He wanted them gone. Of course he did. Probably had another call to make. Let me get my jacket, Jessica said. Outside, Maya waited until they were well away from the house before stopping and grabbing Jessica's arm. Jessica, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost. Jessica looked back at their house, the house she'd thought of as home for 8 years. The house where she'd sacrificed her dreams to care for a man who saw her as nothing more than hired help. I need to tell you something, she said. But you have to promise me you won't think I'm losing my mind. Maya's grip tightened on her arm. I promise. So Jessica told her everything, the conversation she'd overheard, the implications, the betrayal that went deeper than she'd thought possible. When she finished, Maya was quiet for a long moment. Then she said the words Jessica needed to hear. We're going to destroy him. Maya's living room had been transformed into a command center, files spread across her coffee table, a laptop open beside stacks of printed documents, 2 cell phones charging on the side table. For 3 weeks, they'd been building a case against Ethan that would leave him with nothing. The private investigator's report came in, Maya said, sliding a manila folder across to Jessica. You're not going to like it. Jessica opened the folder and immediately understood her warning. Photographs fell out Ethan and Alexandra at restaurants, at a hotel, walking hand in hand through a park. In every single photo, Ethan was upright, moving normally, looking nothing like a man who'd been paralyzed for 4 years. How long? Jessica asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Based on the dates, at least 18 months. But Daniel thinks it goes back further. The hotel clerk remembers them from 2 years ago. 2 years, while Jessica was giving up sleep to care for him, massaging his legs, helping him with the most basic daily tasks, he was meeting another woman at cheap hotels. There's more, Maya continued. She opened the laptop and pulled up a bank statement. Remember how you mentioned he controls all the finances? Jessica nodded. Ethan had convinced her it was easier that way, one person managing everything. Less chance for mistakes. He's been moving money, Jess, large amounts, regularly. Look at this. The screen showed transfers Jessica had never seen before, money going from their joint accounts to accounts she didn't recognize. Tens of thousands of dollars moved over the course of 3 years. Where is it going? Offshore accounts, Swiss banks, places where it would be very hard for you to claim it in a divorce. Jessica's stomach dropped. He's been planning this for years. It gets worse. Maya pulled up another document. I had a friend run a check on the medical records from his accident. The ones from his follow-up appointments don't match what his doctors originally recommended. What do you mean? His neurologist suggested he continue physical therapy and try some experimental treatments. But according to the insurance records, Ethan declined most of them. He specifically requested to be classified as having a permanent disability. The pieces were falling into place, creating a picture so ugly Jessica could barely look at it. He planned this from the beginning, she whispered. It looks that way. The question now is, what are we going to do about it? Jessica stared at the photographs scattered across the table, Ethan smiling, his arm around Alexandra, Ethan walking confidently across a parking lot, Ethan being the man she'd fallen in love with, just not with her. I want him to lose everything, she said quietly. That's the spirit, but we have to be smart about this. One wrong move and he could disappear with all that money. Maya was right. Ethan was clearly intelligent, manipulative, and had been planning this for years. But he had one weakness, his arrogance. He thought Jessica was completely clueless, just a free maid who would never fight back. It was time to prove him wrong. What's the plan? Jessica asked. Maya smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. First, we document everything, every lie, every manipulation, every penny he's stolen. Then we wait for the perfect moment to spring the trap. How will we know when that is? Trust me, men like Ethan always overreach. They get confident, sloppy, When he does, we'll be ready. Over the next hour, they refined their strategy. Maya had contacts, lawyers, investigators, people who knew how to handle men like Ethan. Jessica would continue playing the devoted wife while secretly gathering evidence. The hardest part would be going home and pretending nothing had changed. Ethan was in the living room when Jessica walked in, doing his evening exercises, the ones designed to maintain muscle tone in his supposedly useless legs. "How was your visit with Maya?" he asked without looking up. "Fine, we just talked." "Good. You need friends. It's important to maintain relationships outside of caregiving." The casual way he said it made Jessica's skin crawl, as if he actually cared about her well-being, as if he wasn't the reason she'd isolated herself from everyone she used to know. "Ethan, Jessica said carefully, "I've been thinking about what your mother said about care facilities." He stopped exercising and looked at her. "What about them? Maybe she's right. Maybe you'd be happier somewhere with professional staff." His eyes hardened for just a split second before the concerned husband mask slipped back into place. "Jessica, we've talked about this. I want to be here with you. We're a team." A team. Right. Because no one else would work for free while he stole their life savings. "I know, but I worry I'm not giving you the best care. Someone with proper training might. I don't want anyone else taking care of me." "Okay," Jessica said softly. "I just want what's best for you. I know you do." He reached out and took her hand, squeezing gently. "That's why I love you so much." The words should have melted her heart. Instead, they felt like poison. That night, Jessica lay in the guest bed staring at the ceiling. Down the hall, she could hear Ethan talking quietly on his phone, probably to Alexandra, planning their future together, while Jessica played nursemaid to a man who could walk perfectly fine, but not for much longer. Jessica pulled out her phone and scrolled through the photos Maya had taken of the evidence they'd gathered: bank statements, medical records, private investigator reports. Ethan thought he was so clever, but he'd left a trail a mile wide. His biggest mistake was underestimating Jessica. For 4 years, he'd trained her to be invisible, to anticipate his needs, to move through the house like a ghost. He had no idea she'd been watching him just as carefully as he'd been manipulating her. Tomorrow, Jessica would start the final phase of their plan, the part where Ethan Carter learned that even free maids eventually demand payment for their services. And the bill was about to come due. "I think we should have a party," Jessica announced over breakfast the next morning. Ethan looked up from his eggs, fork suspended halfway to his mouth. "A party. For our anniversary. It's been 4 years since the accident. 4 years of getting through this together." The words tasted bitter, but Jessica kept her voice light. "I thought it might be nice to celebrate how far we've come." Ethan set down his fork slowly. Jessica could see him calculating, trying to figure out her angle. "Jess, you know I don't like being around a lot of people. It's embarrassing being in this chair." Perfect response. Exactly what she'd expected. "Not a lot of people, just close friends. Maya, maybe a few others. Your mother, of course. People who care about us." "I don't know." "Please, Ethan, I've been feeling so isolated lately. It would mean a lot to me." Jessica let her voice break just slightly on the last words. Ethan's expression softened, not because he cared about her feelings, but because his fine, isolated wife fit perfectly into his narrative of her mental instability. "Okay," he said finally, "if it's important to you, but keep it small. Of course, maybe Saturday afternoon I could make your favorite foods." "That sounds nice." He smiled at her then, and for just a moment, Jessica remembered why she'd fallen in love with him before the lies, before the manipulation, before he turned her into someone she barely recognized. The memory hurt more than his betrayal. After breakfast, Jessica called Maya. "It's happening," she said simply. "Saturday. Saturday," Maya repeated. "I'll make the calls. Everyone will be there." Everyone included Daniel Rodriguez, the private investigator, Jennifer Morris, the divorce attorney, Rebecca Carter, and three of their closest friends, people who'd watched Jessica sacrifice everything for her disabled husband and thought she was a saint. They were about to learn the truth. The week passed in a blur of preparation. Jessica cleaned the house obsessively, cooked Ethan's favorite dishes, arranged flowers. To anyone watching, she looked like a devoted wife planning a celebration of their marriage's survival through hardship. Ethan grew more relaxed as the week progressed. Jessica caught him on the phone several times, voice low and intimate. Once, she heard him laugh and say, "Just a few more months, babe, then we're free." Free. The word made Jessica's chest ache, but not for the reason Ethan thought. Saturday morning arrived, gray and drizzly, perfect weather for what was coming. Jessica was in the kitchen putting finishing touches on the food when she heard a car in the driveway. Through the window, she saw Rebecca getting out of her Mercedes, pulling a covered dish from the back seat. "Your mother's here," Jessica called to Ethan. "Great. Can you help me get positioned in the living room? I want to be in the chair by the window." Jessica helped him transfer from his wheelchair to the living room chair, a production that involved her supporting most of his weight while he made pain sounds and gripped her shoulders. His performance was flawless. If Jessica hadn't known better, she would have believed he was genuinely struggling. Rebecca bustled in with her usual energy, kissing Ethan's cheek and studying Jessica with sharp eyes. "Jessica, you look tired. Are you taking your vitamins?" "I'm fine, Rebecca. Thank you for coming." "Of course, though, I have to say I'm surprised you wanted to celebrate this anniversary." She gestured vaguely at Ethan's legs, as if his disability was something too delicate to name directly. "It's important to acknowledge what we've been through," Jessica said. "How we've grown." More guests arrived over the next hour. Maya came with Jennifer, introduced as her friend Sarah. Daniel arrived as a neighbor stopping by with a casserole. Their friends Tom and Janet Reynolds brought wine and sympathetic smiles. Ethan held court from his chair, telling stories about his recovery process, praising Jessica's dedication as his caregiver. He was charming, gracious, inspiring. Their guests hung on his every word. "Jessica's been incredible," he said, reaching for her hand. "I don't know what I would have done without her." Janet dabbed at her eyes. "You two are such an inspiration. The way you faced this challenge together." "Jessica's sacrificed so much," Rebecca added. "Her career, her social life, everything for Ethan." "I haven't sacrificed anything," Jessica said quietly. "I've just been doing what any wife would do." Ethan squeezed her hand. "See, this is why I love her so much." The words twisted in Jessica's stomach, but she smiled and squeezed back. Around 3 o'clock, Jessica excused herself to check on the food in the kitchen. Maya followed her. "How are you holding up?" she whispered. "I feel sick," Jessica admitted, listening to him lie to everyone's faces. "It's almost over. Just a little longer." Maya glanced at her watch. "Are you sure the timing will work?" Daniel confirmed it this morning. "Alexandra's coming at 4:30. She thinks Ethan will be alone. He told her I was going to my sister's for the weekend." Jessica's sister lived 3 states away. She hadn't seen her in 2 years. "And the recording equipment, already in place, everything's going to be captured." Jessica nodded and took a deep breath. One more hour of playing the devoted wife, then Ethan would learn what it felt like to have your entire world crumble in front of people you cared about. They returned to the living room where Ethan was telling Tom about his latest physical therapy session, complete fiction, since he'd stopped going months ago. "The progress is slow," Ethan was saying, "but the doctors say there's still hope. Jessica never gives up on me." Jessica felt everyone's eyes on her, warm with admiration for her dedication. If only they knew. At 4:20, Jessica stood up and stretched. "I should start cleaning up the kitchen." "Let me help," Janet offered. "No, please stay with Ethan. I'll just be a few minutes." Jessica went to the kitchen and waited. Through the window, she could see a sleek silver BMW pulling into the driveway. Alexandra. Right on time. Jessica's heart hammered as she heard the key in the front door. The key Ethan had obviously given her. There was a moment of silence from the living room. Then Ethan's voice. loud and panicked. "Alexandra, what are you doing here? You said Jessica was gone for the weekend," came her confused response. "What are all these cars? Oh my God." Jessica walked back into the living room just as Alexandra appeared in the doorway. She was beautiful, tall, blonde, confident. Everything Jessica used to be before 4 years of being Ethan's free maid had worn her down. Alexandra froze when she saw the room full of people. Ethan sat in his chair, face white as paper. "I'm sorry, Alexandra stammered. "I didn't realize you had company. I should go." "Wait," Jessica said calmly. "Don't leave on our account." She turned to the room. "Ethan, aren't you going to introduce us to your friend?" Everyone was staring now. Rebecca looked confused. Tom and Janet exchanged glances. Maya sat perfectly still, her phone in her lap, recording everything. "This is Alexandra," Ethan said, his voice strained. My physical therapist from before." "Former physical therapist," Alexandra corrected quickly. "I was just dropping off some old equipment." "What equipment?" Jessica asked pleasantly. Equipment for..." She was floundering. "How interesting that you have a key to our house for a former physical therapist." Jessica continued. The room was dead silent now. Everyone could feel the tension, but they didn't understand it yet. Ethan was gripping the arms of his chair. "Jessica, maybe we should discuss this privately." "Oh, I think our guests would find this conversation very educational," Jessica said, "especially since we're celebrating how far you've come in your recovery." Jessica walked over to Ethan's chair and stood behind it, her hands on the back like a supportive wife. "Tell me, Alexandra," she said, "in your professional opinion, how would you rate Ethan's progress, his mobility? Specifically, I'm not sure what you mean." "Well, when you worked with him, he was completely paralyzed from the waist down. Correct, unable to walk, stand, or support his own weight." Alexandra's eyes darted to Ethan, then back to Jessica. That was the initial diagnosis." "Yes." "And in your expert opinion, would a man with that level of spinal cord damage ever be able to walk again, even after 4 years?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Ethan was breathing hard now, his knuckles white against the chair arms. "Recovery varies," Alexandra said weakly. "Sometimes there can be unexpected improvements." "Unexpected improvements," Jessica repeated. "Like being able to stand up and walk across a room, maybe even walk to a hotel." Rebecca gasped. Janet's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. "Jessica," Ethan said, his voice sharp with warning. "What are you doing?" "I'm asking questions." "Darling, the same questions I should have asked 4 years ago." Jessica looked around the room at their guests' shocked faces. "See, I made an interesting discovery recently. Would you all like to hear about it?" No one answered, but no one left either. They were frozen, waiting for the bomb to drop. 3 weeks ago, I was bringing Ethan his laundry when I heard voices upstairs. Ethan's voice. Specifically, he was having quite an animated conversation with someone on the phone. Jessica paused, letting the implications sink in. "The interesting thing was, when I reached his bedroom door, I could see him through the crack." Ethan's face had gone gray. "Jessica, stop." "He was standing," Jessica continued, her voice growing stronger. "Not leaning, not struggling, standing perfectly upright beside his bed, laughing into his phone about his free maid who was too stupid to figure out he'd been lying for 4 years. The silence was deafening. Rebecca's hand was pressed to her mouth. Tom and Janet stared at Ethan like they'd never seen him before. "That's impossible," Rebecca whispered. The doctor said a lot of things," Jessica interrupted. "But Ethan declined most of the treatments they recommended. He specifically requested to be classified as permanently disabled." Jessica looked down at her husband, who was now pressed back in his chair like he was trying to disappear. "Isn't that right, Ethan?" "You're having some kind of breakdown," Ethan said, but his voice was shaky. "The stress of caring for me, it's been too much." You're imagining things. Jessica laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to cut glass. Am I imagining the bank statements showing you've moved over 200,000 to offshore accounts? Am I imagining the hotel receipts, the restaurant bills, the photographs? Jessica nodded to Maya, who stood and pulled a manila folder from her purse. She handed it to Rebecca. Go ahead, Jessica said. Look at them. Rebecca opened the folder with trembling hands. The first photograph showed Ethan and Alexandra walking hand in hand through a park. Ethan was upright, moving normally, smiling. Rebecca's face crumpled. Ethan, what is this? Mom, I can explain. Can you, Jessica asked. Can you explain why you've been meeting with Alexandra for over 2 years? Can you explain why you've been walking around perfectly fine while I've been sleeping on a cot in the guest room, afraid to leave you alone for more than an hour? More photographs were being passed around now. Ethan at restaurants, Ethan getting into cars, Ethan being the man Jessica had fallen in love with, just not with her. 4 years, Jessica said, her voice breaking despite her efforts to stay calm. 4 years of my life. I gave up my career, my friends, my dreams. I turned myself into a shadow because I thought you needed me. Tears were streaming down Jessica's face now, but she didn't care. Let them see what their beloved Ethan had done to her. But you never needed me, did you? You just needed someone stupid enough to take care of you while you planned your escape with your girlfriend. Alexander was backing toward the door, but Tom moved to block her path. I don't think so, he said quietly. I think you should stay and hear this. Ethan tried one more time. This is all a misunderstanding. Jessica's been under tremendous stress. Stand up, Jessica said suddenly. What? You heard me. Stand up right now. Jessica, you know I can't. Stand up, Jessica shouted, her voice echoing through the room. The command was so sharp, so unexpected, that Ethan's body responded before his mind could stop it. He started to push himself up from the chair, his legs tensing to support his weight. He caught himself halfway up, but it was too late. Everyone had seen it, the automatic response of a man whose legs worked perfectly fine. The room erupted. Rebecca was sobbing. Janet was cursing. Tom was staring at Ethan with disgust. Maya was calmly documenting everything with her phone. You bastard, Rebecca whispered. You lying, manipulative bastard. What have you done to her? Ethan sank back into the chair, all pretense finally abandoned. You don't understand. Jessica and I, we weren't working. We haven't been happy for years. So you decided to torture her instead of just getting a divorce. Tom's voice was ice cold. You turned her into your servant while you stole her money and cheated on her. The marriage was already over, Alexandra said suddenly. Finding her voice, Ethan was trapped. He couldn't leave because Jessica would have taken everything in the divorce. So instead, he took everything first, Maya said, still recording. Very noble. Jessica wiped her eyes and looked around the room at these people who'd watched her sacrifice her life for a lie. Some of them looked horrified. Others looked ashamed that they'd never questioned Ethan's story. Get out, Jessica said quietly to Ethan. Get out of my house. Your house, Ethan scoffed. A final attempt at control. This is our house, and legally, Jennifer spoke up for the first time. You've committed fraud, financial abuse, and quite possibly insurance fraud. I'd be very careful about what you say next. Mr. Carter. Ethan's eyes darted to Jennifer, then back to Jessica. Who is she? My attorney, Jessica said. And that's Daniel Rodriguez, the private investigator who's been documenting your miraculous recovery for the past 3 weeks. She gestured to Daniel, who nodded coldly. You planned this, Ethan said, realization dawning. You set me up. No, Ethan, you set yourself up. I just made sure everyone could see it. Rebecca stood up, her face tear-stained but resolute. I'll help him pack. Mom, Ethan protested. Don't, Rebecca held up her hand. Don't say another word. You're coming home with me tonight and tomorrow. You're going to start making this right. if that's even possible. As Rebecca helped Ethan gather his things, he was still maintaining the charade of disability. Though no one was buying it anymore, Jessica sat on the couch, suddenly exhausted. Maya sat beside her, holding her hand. "You did it," she whispered. "It's over." But Jessica knew it wasn't over. It was just beginning. The divorce, the legal battles, the rebuilding of her life, all of it lay ahead. But for the first time in 4 years, she could see a future that wasn't defined by Ethan's needs, a future that belonged to her, and that was worth everything. Jessica took the drive, still uncertain whether to trust Rebecca's sudden change of heart. "I'll need to give this to my attorney." "Of course, and I'm prepared to testify, if it comes to that, though I hope it won't be necessary." Why? Rebecca's composed facade cracked slightly. "Because Ethan would never forgive me, and despite everything, he's still my son." After Rebecca left, Jessica sat at the cafe table for a long time, the USB drive heavy in her palm. She'd come expecting a trap and found an ally instead, an unlikely, complicated ally with her own painful history. Jessica called Jennifer immediately, explaining the meeting and the evidence Rebecca had provided. "Bring it to me right away," Jennifer instructed. "Don't open the files yourself. And Jessica, be careful. If what Rebecca says is true, Ethan is becoming more dangerous, not less." Duh. The next day, Jessica installed a security system with the cameras covering every entrance to her house. She changed her email passwords, set up two-factor authentication on all her accounts, and began documenting every unusual occurrence, cars lingering too long outside her home, hang-up calls, anything that triggered her growing sense of unease. At work, she kept her head down, focusing on learning her new responsibilities and rebuilding her professional confidence. The marketing manager position at Maya's firm was indeed below her previous level, but Jessica found she enjoyed the work creating content for the firm's social media, drafting press releases, designing client presentations. Simple, straightforward tasks that had clear beginnings and endings, unlike the murky, endless caretaking that had consumed the last 4 years of her life. Her coworkers were friendly but not overly curious about her past, for which Jessica was grateful. She wasn't ready to share her story, to see the pity or morbid fascination that often accompanied such revelations. 3 days before the hearing, Jessica came home to find her front door slightly ajar. The security system was disarmed, something she knew she hadn't done. Heart pounding, she backed away from the house and called the police from her car. The officers who responded found no one inside, but it was clear someone had been there. Drawers had been opened, papers shuffled through, but nothing obvious was missing. The security camera footage showed a man in a hoodie approaching the door, but his face was carefully angled away from the camera. "Could it be your husband?" one officer asked after taking her statement. "Ex-husband. And yes, it could be. We're in the middle of divorce proceedings, and I have a restraining order against him." The officer nodded, making a note. "We'll increase patrols in the area, and ma'am, you might want to stay somewhere else for a while." This time, Jessica took the advice. She packed a bag and went to Maya's apartment, where her friend welcomed her with open arms in a spare bedroom. "Just until after the hearing," Jessica insisted. "Then we'll figure out next steps." Maya didn't argue, but Jessica could see the worry in her eyes. The stakes had been raised. This was no longer just about assets and a failed marriage. It was about safety, about freedom, about Jessica's right to rebuild her life without fear. That night, as Jessica tried to sleep in Maya's guest room, her phone buzzed with a text from another unknown number. "Did you really think a restraining order would keep me away? Nothing will keep me from what's mine." Jessica took a screenshot and forwarded it to Jennifer, then turned off her phone. In the darkness, she stared at the unfamiliar ceiling and tried to reconcile the Ethan she'd married with the man who was now stalking and threatening her. Had there been signs she'd missed, red flags she'd ignored? Or had the accident truly changed him, twisted something in his mind until he became capable of this level of cruelty and manipulation? Either way, the man she'd loved was gone, had perhaps never existed at all, and the man who remained was becoming more dangerous by the day. The morning of the hearing dawned clear and cold. Jessica dressed carefully in a conservative navy suit, applied minimal makeup, and pulled her hair back in a simple knot. Jennifer had advised her to project confidence and stability. No jury would believe this woman is unstable, she'd said. Maya accompanied her to the courthouse, where Jennifer was waiting outside the assigned courtroom. "Are you ready?" the attorney asked, her expression serious. Jessica nodded, "As ready as I'll ever be." "Remember, stick to the facts. Don't let Hoffman bait you into an emotional response. That's what they're hoping for, that you'll come across as angry, vindictive, unstable." "I am angry," Jessica pointed out. "Of course you are. Anyone would be. But in that courtroom, you need to be calm, rational, and focused. Save the anger for later." Inside, the courtroom was smaller than Jessica had expected, more intimate. Ethan was already there, seated beside a silver-haired man in an expensive suit, Richard Hoffman, presumably. Ethan was in his wheelchair. Jessica noted with a surge of disgust, still playing the victim. He glanced up as they entered, his expression briefly registering surprise at seeing Jessica so composed. Then his eyes narrowed, calculating, assessing. Jessica met his gaze steadily, refusing to look away first. After a moment, he smiled a cold, confident smile that sent chills down her spine. "Ignore him, Jennifer murmured, guiding Jessica to their table. The hearing began with formal introductions. Judge Ramirez, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, reviewed the emergency orders Jessica had filed in Ethan's response. "I understand there are serious allegations on both sides," she said, looking between the two tables. "Ms. Morris, since your client filed the emergency orders, please present your case first." Jennifer stood, calm and authoritative. "Your Honor, my client, Jessica Carter, has been the victim of an elaborate fraud perpetrated by her husband, Ethan Carter. For the past 2 years, Mr. Carter has been pretending to be paralyzed from a car accident, requiring Mrs. Carter's full-time care while secretly living a double life that included an affair with his former physical therapist and the systematic hiding of marital assets in offshore accounts." Hoffman rose immediately. "Objection, Your Honor. These are outrageous, unsubstantiated claims designed to distract from the real issue, Mrs. Carter's attempt to abandon her disabled husband and seize control of their assets." Judge Ramirez held up a hand. "I'll hear the evidence before making any determinations. Mr. Hoffman, Ms. Morris, please continue." For the next hour, Jennifer methodically presented their case: the photographs from Daniel, the bank statements showing unexplained transfers, the recording of Ethan discussing his plan to have Jessica declared unstable. She saved Rebecca's evidence for last emails between Ethan and Alexandra dating back 2 years, detailed notes about his plan to divorce Jessica once abandonment laws were in his favor, recordings of him walking, driving, living a fully mobile life. Throughout the presentation, Jessica watched Ethan's face. She saw shock when Jennifer mentioned Rebecca's evidence, anger as the details of his fraud were exposed, and finally, a calculating stillness as he leaned over to whisper urgently to Hoffman. When Jennifer finished, Hoffman rose for cross-examination. As Jennifer had predicted, he tried to paint Jessica as unstable, suggesting she had fabricated evidence out of jealousy and resentment. "Mrs. Carter," Hoffman began, his voice silky with false concern, "you've had difficulties adjusting to your role as a caregiver, haven't you?" "I've found it challenging at times," Jessica admitted, "but I was committed to supporting my husband's recovery." "So committed that you've been seeing a therapist for depression and anxiety." Jessica felt a flash of anger. Ethan had shared her private medical information, but she kept her voice steady. "Yes, I sought help with the stress of caregiving. That's what responsible adults do when faced with challenges." Hoffman's questions grew increasingly aggressive, trying to provoke an emotional response. He suggested Jessica had manipulated Rebecca into providing false evidence, that she had staged the photographs with a look-alike, that she was having an affair with Daniel Rodriguez. Through it all, Jessica remained calm, answering factually and concisely. When Hoffman finally ran out of questions, Judge Ramirez called a brief recess before Ethan's testimony. In the hallway, Jennifer squeezed Jessica's arm. "You're doing great. Hoffman's desperate. He knows the evidence is damning." "What about Ethan's testimony? He's a good liar." "He is. But Judge Ramirez has seen the videos. She's seen him walking, talking about his plans. It's going to be hard for him to explain that away." When court resumed, Ethan wheeled himself to the witness stand. The performance was Oscar-worthy, the strain on his face as he positioned the chair, the careful way he arranged his useless legs, the brave smile he offered the judge. "Mr. Carter," Hoffman began, "these are serious allegations your wife has made. How do you respond?" Ethan's voice was steady, reasonable. "With sadness, Your Honor, Jessica has been under tremendous strain these past few years. I've tried to shield her from the worst of my condition, to maintain some dignity despite my limitations. But the stress has clearly affected her perception of reality. And the videos, the recordings of you walking, discussing your plans." Ethan shook his head sadly. "Doctored, or taken out of context. I've been working with experimental therapies, having moments of partial mobility that come and go. Jessica has twisted these hopeful developments into some kind of conspiracy. And the financial transfers, investments, Your Honor, for our future, I've always handled our finances. Jessica has no head for numbers. She's seeing malice where there was only prudent planning. It was masterful, the perfect blend of sympathy for Jessica's delusions and reasonable explanations for the evidence against him." Jessica felt a surge of despair. Would the judge believe him? Would his performance outweigh the facts? Then it was Jennifer's turn for cross-examination. "Mr. Carter," she began, "you claim the videos of you walking are either doctored or show brief moments of mobility due to experimental treatments. Is that correct?" "Yes," Ethan replied confidently. "Interesting, because we have your medical records here, provided by your neurologist, Dr. Sarah Mitchell. They show no participation in experimental therapies. In fact, they show you repeatedly declining such treatments. Can you explain that discrepancy?" Ethan hesitated. "Just for a moment. I sought treatment outside my regular doctors. Alternative therapies." "I see. And these alternative therapies were so successful that you could walk unassisted through Lincoln Park for over an hour, as shown in the investigator's video, that you could drive a car to meet Miss Peterson at the Lakeside Hotel, that you could climb stairs to her apartment. As I said, the mobility comes and goes." "Mr. Carter," Jennifer interrupted, "are you willing to demonstrate your current level of mobility for the court right now?" The question hung in the air. Jessica held her breath. Ethan's eyes darted to Hoffman, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. I'm currently in a downward cycle. The stress of these proceedings." "So that's a no," Jennifer concluded. "One more question. Mr. Carter, how do you explain this?" She played an audio recording Ethan's voice, clear and unmistakable. "She actually believes I can't walk. God, you should see her face when she's helping me into bed at night. All that guilt and pity. It's almost too easy." The courtroom was silent. Ethan's face had gone white. It's taken out of context." "Is it?" Jennifer asked quietly. "Or is it exactly what it appears to be you, admitting to an elaborate fraud designed to exploit your wife's compassion while you stole her money and planned your escape?" Ethan had no answer. For once in his life, he was speechless. Judge Ramirez called an end to testimony shortly after. "I've heard enough," she said, her expression stern. "I'm continuing the emergency orders as filed. Mrs. Carter will have exclusive use of the marital home. All joint assets will remain frozen pending full discovery. The restraining order against Mr. Carter remains in effect." She fixed Ethan with a hard stare. "And Mr. Carter, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential fraud charges. There appears to be significant evidence of financial and insurance fraud that warrants investigation." As the judge left the bench, Jessica felt a wave of relief so powerful she had to grip the table to stay upright. They'd won this round. The fight wasn't over, far from it, but they'd drawn first blood. Across the room, Ethan sat motionless in his wheelchair, staring at Jessica with naked hatred. The mask had fallen completely now, revealing the true Ethan Carter, calculating, vindictive, dangerous. "Don't look at him," Jennifer advised, gathering their materials. "Let's go." Outside the courtroom, Maya was waiting, her face anxious. "Well, we won," Jessica said simply. "For now." Maya hugged her fiercely. "I knew you would. First step in taking back your life." As they walked toward the exit, Jessica felt a strange lightness. For 4 years, she'd lived in Ethan's shadow, defined by his needs, his manipulation, his lies. Today, she'd stepped into the light and reclaimed her voice, her truth, her power. The road ahead would be long and difficult. Ethan wouldn't give up easily, the look in his eyes had made that clear. But Jessica wasn't alone anymore. She had Maya, Jennifer, even Rebecca. She had evidence, legal protection, and most importantly, she had herself, stronger and more determined than Ethan had ever imagined. For the first time in years, Jessica Carter walked with her head high, her shoulders straight, and her eyes fixed on the future, her future, on her terms. The woman who had been invisible for so long was finally, truly seen. Caring for who didn't deserve it. The house felt empty after everyone left. Not in a lonely way, but in a cleansing way, as if the air itself had been purified once Ethan was gone. Jessica wandered through the rooms, touching furniture, looking at photographs, trying to reconcile the home she'd known with the truth she now understood. In the bedroom she'd once shared with Ethan, she found his dresser drawers half empty. Rebecca had helped him pack only the essentials, promising to return for the rest. Jessica sat on the edge of the bed, running her fingers over the quilt she'd selected when they first moved in together. So many memories in this room, so many lies. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "How are you holding up? Need company?" Jessica considered the offer. Part of her wanted solitude, space to process everything that had happened. But another part feared the quiet, the thoughts that might come in the darkness. "Yes," she texted back. "And bring wine." An hour later, Maya arrived with not just wine, but also Chinese takeout and Jennifer Morris, the attorney who'd been introduced as her friend at the party. "I hope you don't mind," Maya said as they settled in the kitchen. "Jennifer thought we should talk strategy while everything's fresh." "The sooner we move, the better," Jennifer agreed, unpacking containers of kung pao chicken and vegetable lo mein. In her early 50s, with a sleek silver bob and sharp green eyes, Jennifer Morris carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd seen it all and wasn't easily surprised. "Men like Ethan have contingency plans. We need to stay ahead of him." Jessica nodded, pouring wine into 3 glasses. "What's our first step?" "Financial protection," Jennifer said without hesitation. "Tomorrow morning, you'll go to the bank and open new accounts in your name only. Then you'll file for an emergency order to freeze your joint assets." "Can we do that?" "With the evidence you have, absolutely." Wow. Judges don't look kindly on spouses who hide assets offshore." Jennifer pulled out a legal pad and began writing. "The good news is that Daniel captured video of Ethan walking and discussing his plans to defraud you. That's going to be invaluable." "What about the offshore accounts?" "More complicated, but not impossible. I have colleagues who specialize in recovering hidden assets. The key is moving quickly, before Ethan can transfer more funds or create more barriers." Maya uncorked the wine. "What about the house?" "It's in both their names," Jennifer said. "And Jessica has been the one maintaining it, paying bills, keeping it running. We'll file for exclusive use during the divorce proceedings. With evidence of Ethan's fraud and infidelity, no judge would force Jessica to leave." Jessica took a large swallow of wine. It was all happening so fast. Just this morning, she'd been preparing for a party, pretending everything was normal. Now she was planning a divorce strategy with an attorney she just met. "What about his claims that I'm unstable, that I can't handle his care?" Jennifer smiled thinly. "Hard to claim you can't handle his care when he doesn't need care. The videos destroy that narrative completely." "And Rebecca," Jessica asked. Will she testify against her son? Maya and Jennifer exchanged glances. Would she? Maya asked. Jessica thought about Rebecca's face when she saw the photographs, the way she'd called Ethan a bastard, the determination with which she'd taken control of the situation. I think she might. She looked betrayed, like she was seeing Ethan for the first time. That could be powerful, Jennifer acknowledged. A mother testifying about her son's deception. But don't count on it. Family loyalty runs deep, and Ethan will have time to work on her, to spin his version of events. Jessica nodded, knowing Jennifer was right. Rebecca loved her son. She might be angry now, but that anger could fade when faced with the reality of legal proceedings against him. What about Alexandra? Maya asked. Could we subpoena her? Definitely, she's a material witness to the fraud. Jennifer made another note. But again, don't expect cooperation. From what I saw today, she's fully complicit in Ethan's scheme. Jessica pushed her food around on her plate, her appetite gone. It's going to get ugly, isn't it? Jennifer set down her pen and looked Jessica directly in the eye. Yes, it's going to get very ugly. Ethan will fight with everything he has. He'll try to paint you as mentally unstable, vindictive, money-hungry. He'll try to turn friends against you. He'll lie, manipulate, and charm his way through this process because that's what men like him do when they're cornered. But, Maya interjected, he won't win because we have the truth. We have evidence. And we have you stronger than he ever imagined. Jessica wasn't so sure about that last part. She didn't feel strong. She felt hollowed out, a shell of the woman she used to be presenting. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the shell needed to break completely before the new Jessica could emerge. What do I do tomorrow? She asked, focusing on the immediate future. One step at a time. Bank first thing, Jennifer said. Then meet me at my office at 10 to file the emergency orders. Bring any financial documents, you have tax returns, bank statements, and investment records, and change the locks on the house tonight. Is that legal? Given the circumstances and the evidence of fraud, yes, we'll include it in the emergency filing. After Maya and Jennifer left, Jessica wandered through the house again, this time with purpose. In Ethan's office, she began searching for the financial documents Jennifer had requested. Most were in a locked file cabinet, but Jessica knew where Ethan kept the key hidden in a copy of The Art of War on his bookshelf. So like him to choose that particular book. Inside the cabinet, she found folders neatly labeled and organized. Tax returns, investment statements, insurance policies. Ethan had always been meticulous about paperwork. She gathered what she needed, then hesitated, her hand hovering over a folder labeled medical. Jessica pulled it out and opened it. Inside were the records from Ethan's accident and subsequent treatment, x-rays showing the impact to his spine, doctor's reports detailing his injuries, physical therapy assessments tracking his progress. The initial diagnosis had been real. Ethan had genuinely been injured in the crash. But as Jessica flipped through the documents, she found what Jennifer's contact had described later, reports showing unexpected improvement, doctors recommending more aggressive treatment, Ethan declining and insisting on a permanent disability classification. There was even a handwritten note from Dr. Mitchell. Patient-resistant to exploring new therapies despite significant potential for recovery. Seems fixed on worst-case outcome. It hadn't all been a lie then, just the last 2 years, just half their marriage. Somehow, that hurt more than if it had all been false from the beginning. Jessica returned to the living room and sat heavily on the couch. On the coffee table lay the photographs Daniel had taken Ethan walking, laughing, living a life she knew nothing about. She picked one up, studying her husband's face. He looked happy, genuinely happy, in a way she hadn't seen since before the accident. Had he ever loved her, or had she just been convenient, a stepping stone to the life he really wanted? Jessica's phone rang, startling her. Ethan's name flashed on the screen. She stared at it, heart racing, then declined the call. Seconds later, a text appeared. We need to talk. This doesn't have to be so complicated. Jessica didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Nothing that would change what had happened, what was still happening. Another reality to face. Another piece of her life that had been dependent on Ethan. The list seemed endless, and that evening, Jessica sat in her living room with a glass of wine, scrolling through job listings on her laptop. Marketing director positions were scarce, and most required recent experience she no longer had. She might have to start lower on the ladder, rebuild her career from a junior position. Her phone rang, Maya checking in. How did it go with Jennifer? Good, I think we filed everything. Now we wait. And how are you, really? Jessica considered the question. How was she angry? Certainly hurt, devastated, humiliated, but also something else, something she hadn't felt in years. I'm free, she said finally. It's terrifying, but I'm free. That's my girl. Listen, I talked to my boss today. The firm needs someone to handle their social media and client communications. It's not a director position, but it would get you back in the game. Are you interested? Jessica felt a surge of gratitude. Maya, you don't have to. I'm not doing you a favor. I'm doing the firm a favor. They need someone good, and you're good. Think about it. Okay. After they hung up, Jessica closed the job listings and opened a new document. For the first time in 4 years, she began updating her resume, reclaiming her professional identity one bullet point at a time. As she worked, memories flooded back her early days with Ethan, when they'd been equals, partners in every sense. They'd met at a charity gala where Jessica was representing her agency and Ethan was there with clients. He'd been charming, attentive, genuinely interested in her work. Their courtship had been a whirlwind of fancy restaurants, weekend getaways, and late-night conversations about their dreams for the future. Ethan had proposed after just 6 months, presenting her with a diamond ring and promises of a life together filled with adventure and success. Jessica had said yes without hesitation, certain she'd found her perfect match. The first 2 years of marriage had lived up to those promises. They'd traveled, advanced in their careers, renovated their house, and begun talking about starting a family. Ethan had been supportive of Jessica's ambitions, proud of her accomplishments. When had that changed? Had it been the accident itself, or something that had been brewing beneath the surface all along? Jessica saved her resume and closed the laptop. These questions had no answers, or at least none that would bring her peace. What mattered now was moving forward, reclaiming her life one decision at a time. Her phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number, but the message made it clear who it was from. I know you think I'm the villain here, but you forced my hand. You'll regret going to war with me. Jessica stared at the message, her heart racing. A threat, clear and simple. Her first instinct was to be afraid the old Jessica, conditioned to fear Ethan's displeasure. But something else rose up instead, anger. Pure, cleansing anger. She took a screenshot of the message and sent it to Jennifer with a simple note from Ethan. New number. Jennifer's response came quickly. Save everything. No response. We'll add it to the file. Jessica blocked the number, then sat in the quiet house, listening to her own breathing. Ethan thought he could intimidate her into submission, just as he had for years with subtle manipulations and calculated cruelty. He didn't understand that the woman he'd trained to be invisible was now wide awake, watching his every move. The next morning, Jessica drove to Maya's law firm for an informal interview. As she walked through the sleek downtown office, dressed in a suit she'd pulled from the back of her closet, she felt like an imposter. The confident marketing executive was long gone, replaced by a woman who'd spent 4 years anticipating someone else's needs while neglecting her own. But the managing partner, a no-nonsense woman named Diane, didn't seem to notice Jessica's insecurity. Maya speaks highly of you, she said, reviewing Jessica's resume. And your previous work is impressive. The gap is concerning, of course, but understandable given the circumstances. Jessica nodded, unsure how much Maya had shared about her situation. I'll be honest with you, Jessica, this position is below your previous level. The pay reflects that. but it could be a stepping stone back into the industry. I understand and I'm willing to start wherever I need to. Diane studied her for a moment. May I speak frankly? Please, Visam. I know something about what you're going through. Not the specifics, but the general situation. I've seen it before with clients, with friends. The transition back to independence can be overwhelming. Some women try to do too much too soon and burn out. Jessica appreciated the candor. What would you suggest? Part-time to start, 3 days a week. Focus on getting your personal life stabilized, first the divorce, housing, finances. Then we can talk about increasing hours and responsibilities. It was a generous offer, and Jessica accepted on the spot. As she left the office with a start date for the following week, she felt a small spark of hope. Her life wasn't over. It was just beginning again, differently. That spark dimmed slightly when she arrived home to find a large envelope from Ethan's attorney on her doorstep. Inside was a formal response to her emergency filings cold, legal language contesting every claim, painting Jessica as an opportunist, taking advantage of a disabled man. Attached was a settlement offer that would give Jessica a fraction of their assets and require her to vacate the house within 30 days. Jessica called Jennifer immediately. I just got served with Ethan's response, and a settlement offer that's insulting at best. As expected, Jennifer said calmly. His attorney is Richard Hoffman, known for aggressive tactics and dragging things out to wear down the other side. Don't worry, I've faced him before. The offer but is garbage. Ignore it. This is just the opening move in what will be a long game. Remember, we have evidence they don't know about yet. We're in a stronger position than they realize. Jessica tried to take comfort in Jennifer's confidence, but as she read through the documents again, doubt crept in. Ethan had resources, connections, and a lifetime of practice at manipulation. She had a folder of photographs and a recording that might not even be admissible in court. Was she fooling herself, thinking she could win against him, as if sensing her wavering resolve? Maya showed up that evening with takeout and determination. I heard from Jennifer about Hoffman's response, she said, unpacking containers of Thai food on Jessica's kitchen counter. Classic intimidation tactics. Don't let it get to you. Easy to say, Jessica replied, pouring them each a glass of wine. Harder when you are being painted as a gold-digging hysteric. That's exactly what they want you to feel: small, overwhelmed, ready to accept whatever crumbs they offer. Maya handed Jessica a plate. But here's what they don't know: you've been through worse already. 4 years of psychological warfare, 4 years of gaslighting and isolation, and you survived. Not just survived, you fought back. Jessica managed a small smile, but, when did you become so wise? No. I've always been wise. You were just too busy changing adult diapers for a man who could run a marathon to notice. The absurdity of it all hit Jessica suddenly, and she laughed, a real laugh, possibly her first in years. Maya joined in, and for a moment the weight of Jessica's situation lifted slightly. I got a job today, Jessica said when they'd calmed down. Part-time at Maya's firm. That's fantastic. The first step in the Jessica Carter renaissance. Renaissance, I was thinking more like Jessica Carter crawls out of the wreckage. Nope, renaissance it is. A rebirth, a flowering of your true self after a dark period. Jessica sipped her wine, considering. I like that. A renaissance. They spent the rest of the evening planning Jessica's immediate future: the job, the divorce proceedings, the eventual need to find her own place once the house was sold. Maya didn't sugarcoat the challenges ahead, but she also refused to let Jessica dwell on the worst possibilities. One day at a time, she insisted. One victory at a time. By the time Maya left, Jessica felt steadier, more resolved. Ethan had stolen 4 years of her life. She wouldn't give him a single day more. The preliminary hearing was set for a Tuesday morning, 10 days after Jessica had filed the emergency orders. In the intervening time, she'd started her new job, met twice more with Jennifer to prepare, and received 3 more threatening texts from Ethan. each from a different unknown number. He's escalating, Jennifer said when Jessica showed her the latest message, a more explicit threat to destroy her if she didn't drop the case. This is good for us, legally speaking. It shows his true character. Doesn't feel good from where I'm sitting, Jessica replied. They were in Jennifer's office, reviewing their strategy for the hearing. I keep thinking I see his car outside the house. I'm jumping at every noise. Jennifer's expression softened. Have you considered a security system or staying with Maya until this is resolved? Jessica shook her head. I'm not leaving my home. He's taken enough from me. Admirable, but safety comes first. At least get some cameras installed. Jessica agreed, making a mental note to research options that evening. As she left Jennifer's office, her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Normally, she would let it go to voicemail, wary of another contact attempt from Ethan. But something made her answer. Jessica, it's Rebecca. Rebecca Carter. Jessica nearly dropped the phone in surprise. She hadn't heard from Ethan's mother since the day of the party. Rebecca, how are you? As well as can be expected, given the circumstances. Her voice was strained but composed. I was wondering if we might meet. There are things I think you should know. Warning bells rang in Jessica's mind. Was this a trap, an attempt by Ethan to gather information or manipulate her through his mother? I'm not sure that's a good idea, Jessica said carefully. My attorney has advised me not to discuss the case with anyone connected to Ethan. This isn't about the case, at least not directly. It's about Ethan himself. Things you need to understand if you're going to protect yourself. Something in Rebecca's tone, a hint of fear, perhaps made Jessica reconsider. Where would you like to meet? They arranged to meet at a small cafe downtown, neutral territory far from both their homes. Jessica arrived early, selecting a table with a clear view of the door and texting Maya her location, just in case. Rebecca arrived precisely on time, as put together as ever in a tailored navy suit, though Jessica noticed new lines of strain around her eyes. Thank you for meeting me, Rebecca said, sliding into the seat across from Jessica. I know you have every reason to be suspicious. Why am I here, Rebecca? Rebecca sighed, removing her gloves with deliberate care. First, I want to apologize for my role in all this, for not seeing what was happening, or perhaps for not wanting to see it. You didn't know he was faking. No, at least not consciously, but I should have questioned things more. The inconsistencies in his story, his resistance to treatments that might have helped him. She trailed off, then met Jessica's gaze directly. But that's not why I asked to see you. I'm here because I'm worried about what Ethan might do next. Jessica's stomach tightened. What do you mean? Ethan is not well. Mentally, he's always been charming, persuasive, able to get what he wants. But there's a darkness in him that I've ignored for too long. His father was the same way. His father, you never talk about him. For good reason. Walter was charismatic, successful, and utterly without conscience. He cheated on me throughout our marriage, controlled every aspect of our lives. And when I finally found the courage to leave, he systematically destroyed me financially, socially, emotionally. Jessica stared at Rebecca, seeing her in a new light. The perfectly groomed socialite had her own history of abuse, her own scars carefully hidden beneath designer clothing and social graces. Ethan was 15 when I left Walter. Rebecca continued. Old enough to understand what was happening, young enough to be shaped by it. He chose his father's side, learned his tactics. By the time I realized what was happening, the pattern was set. Why are you telling me this now? Rebecca reached across the table, briefly touching Jessica's hand. Because you need to know what you're dealing with. Ethan won't just fight you in court. He'll try to break you, to make you give up. He'll target your friends, your reputation. How do you know this? Because it's what Walter did to me. And because, Rebecca hesitated, then continued more quietly, because Ethan has already started. He's been calling your new employers, suggesting you are unstable. He's contacted your friends with stories about your mental health. He's even tried to access your medical records. Jessica felt cold all over. How do you know this? He's staying with me. I've overheard his calls, seen notes on his computer. I've tried to intervene, but he just tells me I don't understand, that you forced his hand. And you're telling me this because no one helped me when Walter was destroying my life. Because I've enabled Ethan's worst instincts for too long. Because what he did to you was unforgivable. And what he's planning now is worse. Rebecca straightened her shoulders. And because I have evidence that might help you. From her purse, Rebecca withdrew a small USB drive, emails, bank statements, recordings of Ethan discussing his plans, both before and after you discovered the truth. I downloaded them from his laptop while he was out. Jessica stared at the drive, scarcely able to believe what she was hearing. Why would you do this? He's your son. Yes, he is. And I've failed him in many ways by staying with Walter too long, by not getting him help when I saw the signs, by looking the other way when he began to follow his father's path. I can't undo those mistakes, but I can try to stop him from destroying someone else the way his father destroyed me. Text, I never meant to hurt you. Jessica laughed bitterly. 4 years of lies. And that's what he had to say. She turned off her phone and went to bed, sleeping for the first time in years in the master bedroom, alone in the center of the mattress, taking up all the space she wanted. The next morning, Jessica woke to pounding on her front door. She checked the time, 6:45 a.m., too early for normal visitors. Wrapping a robe around herself, she went downstairs and peered through the peephole. Ethan stood on the porch, looking haggard in the same clothes he'd worn yesterday. Behind him, his BMW was parked in the driveway. I know you're in there, Jessica, he called. We need to talk. Jessica didn't open the door. I have nothing to say to you, Ethan. Please, just 5 minutes. I can explain everything. Explain what? How you lied to me for years, how you stole our money, how you cheated with a woman who was supposed to be helping you recover. It's not that simple. His voice softened, taking on the persuasive tone that had once made her agree to anything. I was in a dark place after the accident. I made mistakes, but I never stopped caring about you. Jessica pressed her forehead against the door. Once, those words would have melted her resolve. Once, she would have done anything to preserve their marriage, to believe they could find their way back to the couple they'd been. But that Jessica was gone. Leave, Ethan. My attorney will contact yours. Attorney, Jesus, Jessica, we don't need to involve lawyers. We can work this out between us. Like you were working out your plan to declare me unstable and take everything, like you were working out your future with Alexandra. Silence on the other side of the door. Then his voice hardened. You don't want to do this. Jessica, you don't want to fight me. Actually, I do. Now please leave before I call the police. This is my house too. You can't keep me out. Watch me. Jessica heard a key in the lock he was trying to get in, but the new lock she'd installed last night held firm. You changed the locks. His voice rose in disbelief. That's illegal. So is fraud, Jessica replied calmly. I'm calling the police now. She wasn't bluffing. Jessica dialed 911 and reported that her estranged husband was attempting to enter her home against her wishes. While she waited for the police to arrive, Ethan alternated between threats and pleas, his true nature revealing itself more with each passing minute. When the police car pulled up, Ethan immediately changed his demeanor, standing straighter, smoothing his hair, preparing to charm the officers. Jessica watched through the window as he explained the situation, gesturing animatedly, playing the reasonable husband dealing with an emotional wife. But Jessica had evidence. When she opened the door to speak with the officers, she had the photographs ready, along with the documentation of Ethan's financial fraud. Ma'am, this is a civil matter, one officer explained after reviewing the materials. But given the circumstances, we can escort your husband off the property. You should file for a formal order of protection if you feel threatened. I understand, Jessica said. Thank you. As the officers walked Ethan back to his car, he turned to look at Jessica one last time. The mask had slipped completely now, revealing a cold fury that sent chills down her spine. This was the real Ethan Carter, not the charming investment banker she'd married, not the devoted husband he'd pretended to be, but a man willing to destroy anyone who stood in his way. Jessica closed the door and leaned against it, breathing deeply. The confrontation had left her shaking, but also strangely empowered. She'd stood her ground. She'd chosen herself, and it was only the beginning. He showed up at the house this morning, Jessica told Jennifer later that day as they sat in the attorney's office, surrounded by the documents they just filed with the court. Tried to get in with his key. Jennifer nodded, unsurprised. Classic move. He's testing boundaries, seeing what he can get away with. The emergency order we filed today will help with that temporary exclusive use of the marital home, freezing of joint assets, and a preliminary restraining order keeping him 500 feet away from you and the property. Will it hold? It should, amended. Judge Ramirez has seen cases like this before. She doesn't have much patience for financial abusers. Jessica stared out the window at the Chicago skyline, buildings gleaming in the afternoon sun. How many other women were out there, she wondered, trapped in relationships built on lies? How many were being manipulated by partners they trusted, believing themselves to be the problem? What happens next, she asked. Ethan will be served with the orders, probably tomorrow. He'll hire an attorney, a good one, judging by the offshore accounts. They'll file motions to dismiss or modify the emergency orders. We'll have a preliminary hearing within the next 10 days. And then, discovery phase. We'll request full financial disclosure, depose witnesses, gather additional evidence. It could take months. Months. Jessica tried to imagine living in this limbo for months, the uncertainty, the legal battles, the inevitable gossip among friends and neighbors. She'd have to find a job, reestablish her career after a 4-year gap. She'd have to learn to be independent again, to make decisions without second-guessing herself. It was terrifying and exhilarating. Do you think we'll win? Jessica asked. Jennifer considered the question. Define win. I want what's fair, my share of our assets, the house if possible. I want him to admit what he did, to face consequences. The financial part is achievable. The admission of guilt, less likely. Men like Ethan rarely admit wrongdoing, even when confronted with irrefutable evidence. Jessica nodded, unsurprised but still disappointed. Part of her, a small, wounded part, wanted Ethan to acknowledge the pain he'd caused, to show some remorse for stealing 4 years of her life. One more thing, Jennifer said, closing a folder. Your medical insurance? It's through Ethan's employer, correct? Yes. Why? You'll need to arrange alternative coverage. Once the divorce proceedings begin, he could remove you from his plan. Another, I'm certain of it. And there's more. Last year, I consulted a neurologist about memory issues I was having, just normal aging concerns. Nothing serious, but the records could be used to suggest I'm cognitively impaired, that my testimony isn't reliable. The pieces clicked into place: Ethan's emergency hearing, his vague references to new evidence, Rebecca's disappearance. It was all part of his plan. We need to call Jennifer, Jessica said, reaching for her phone. Right now, Saad. The courtroom was packed the next morning. Word had spread about the dramatic developments in the Carter divorce case, drawing curious spectators and even a few reporters. Jessica sat beside Jennifer at their table, trying to project confidence despite her churning stomach. Across the aisle, Ethan sat with Hoffman. No wheelchair today, Jessica noted. Perhaps he'd decided the pretense was no longer necessary. He caught her looking and smiled, that same cold, confident smile from the preliminary hearing. He thought he had won. Rebecca sat directly behind Jessica, composed once more after a night of rest and preparation with Jennifer. She'd agreed to testify again, to explain exactly how Ethan had manipulated her and stolen her personal data. Judge Ramirez entered and the court came to order. I understand Mr. Carter has requested this emergency hearing based on new evidence. she began. Mr. Hoffman, you may proceed. Hoffman rose, exuding confidence. Thank you, Your Honor. We have discovered evidence that fundamentally undermines Mrs. Carter's claims against my client. Evidence that proves she has engaged in a systematic campaign to defame Mr. Carter and seize marital assets to which she is not entitled. He proceeded to present exactly what they had feared: carefully edited excerpts from Rebecca's emails expressing uncertainty about both Ethan and Jessica's mental states, medical records suggesting memory issues, and doctored timestamps on key evidence to suggest it had been created after the fact. Furthermore, Hoffman continued, we have expert testimony indicating that the videos allegedly showing Mr. Carter walking unassisted have been digitally altered. This was new. Jessica glanced at Jennifer, who showed no reaction but made a quick note on her legal pad. When Hoffman finished his presentation, Judge Ramirez turned to Jennifer. Ms. Morris, your response. Jennifer stood calmly. Your Honor, Mr. Hoffman's bombshell evidence is nothing more than a desperate attempt by Ethan Carter to discredit his mother's testimony through stolen personal data and manipulated records. We have Rebecca Carter here today, ready to testify about how Mr. Carter gained access to her computer and external drives through false pretenses. She turned slightly. Additionally, we have Gabriela Martinez, a nurse at Chicago General Hospital who has recently been dating Mr. Carter. Ms. Martinez will testify that Mr. Carter has been walking normally in her presence and has been attempting to gain unauthorized access to Mrs. Carter's medical records. At the mention of Gabriela, Ethan's composure cracked. His head whipped around, scanning the courtroom until he located Gabriela sitting quietly in the back row. The look he gave her would have withered steel. Finally, Jennifer continued, regarding the supposed expert testimony about digitally altered videos, we have the original files here, along with our own expert who can verify their authenticity. We also have new footage, taken just last week, showing Mr. Carter entering Ms. Martinez's apartment building on foot, with no mobility assistance whatsoever. Judge Ramirez listened intently, then nodded. I'll hear from Ms. Carter first, then Mrs. Martinez. Rebecca's testimony was devastating in its simplicity. She described Ethan's visit, his apparent remorse, and her discovery the next morning that he had taken her devices. She explained the context of the emails Hoffman had presented, showing how they had been selectively edited to create a false impression. I consulted a neurologist last year for routine memory concerns, she concluded. The doctor found nothing significant, just normal aging. I am of sound mind, Your Honor, and I stand by my previous testimony. My son has engaged in a systematic fraud against his wife, and now he is attempting to manipulate this court using stolen personal data. Gabriela's testimony followed, calm and professional, despite Ethan's glares. She described how she had met Ethan, his claims about his disability, and her growing suspicion as she noticed discrepancies in his behavior. Last Tuesday evening, I arrived at his apartment unannounced. Through the window, I saw him standing in the kitchen, preparing dinner. He was moving normally, chopping vegetables, reaching for items on high shelves. When he heard me at the door, he rushed to his wheelchair and pretended he'd been in it all along. And what about his inquiries regarding Mrs. Carter's medical records? Jennifer asked. He asked me several times about hospital security protocols, specifically how patient records are protected and who can access them. He was particularly interested in psychiatric records. Throughout both testimonies, Jessica watched Ethan. His confidence had evaporated, replaced by a tightly controlled fury that seemed to radiate from him in waves. He whispered frantically to Hoffman, who looked increasingly grim. When Jennifer presented the new video crystal clear footage of Ethan walking into Gabriela's building, taken by the security camera in her lobby, the last of his defenses crumbled. Judge Ramirez called a brief recess after the testimonies. When court resumed, her expression was stern. Mr. Carter, she began, this court takes a very dim view of attempts to manipulate the judicial process. The evidence presented today suggests you have engaged in theft of personal data, potential tampering with evidence, attempted unauthorized access to medical records, and continued fraud regarding your physical condition. She turned to Hoffman. Mr. Hoffman, I'm dismissing your motion for reconsideration of the preliminary orders. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney for potential criminal charges, including fraud, theft, and witness tampering. The judge looked directly at Ethan. Mr. Carter, I strongly suggest you begin considering a settlement offer that reflects the severity of your actions. This court will not look favorably upon further delay tactics or attempts to manipulate these proceedings. As the courtroom emptied, Jessica felt lightheaded with relief. They had weathered Ethan's last, desperate attack. The end was finally in sight. Outside, Rebecca approached Jessica hesitantly. I'm so sorry for everything, for not seeing what Ethan was doing to you sooner, for the role I played in making you doubt yourself. Jessica surprised herself by pulling Rebecca into a hug. You have nothing to apologize for. You helped me when it mattered most, at great personal cost. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. He was such a sweet boy once. I don't know where I went wrong. You didn't, Jessica said firmly. Ethan made his own choices, just as you made yours when you chose to stand up for the truth. As they parted, Jessica spotted Gabriella waiting nervously near the courthouse steps. She walked over, extending her hand. Thank you for your testimony today. It can't have been easy. Gabriella shook her head. It wasn't, but after seeing those videos, hearing the recordings, I couldn't stay silent. The thought that he was doing to me what he did to you. She broke off, composing herself. I just wish I'd trusted my instincts sooner. We all do, Jessica said softly. But you did trust them eventually. That's what matters. The next 6 months brought a flurry of legal activity. Criminal charges were filed against Ethan for fraud, theft of Rebecca's property, and attempted unauthorized access to medical records. The insurance company that had been paying his disability benefits filed their own lawsuit to recover funds. And the divorce proceedings continued, now heavily weighted in Jessica's favor. Through it all, Jessica focused on rebuilding her life. Her position as marketing director at Maya's firm provided financial stability and creative fulfillment. She moved from her temporary apartment to a small, charming condo of her own. She continued therapy, working through the layers of trauma Ethan had inflicted. She also found herself becoming an unofficial resource for other women in similar situations. Gabriella was the first, but others followed friends of friends, clients of Maya's firm, women who had heard Jessica's story through the grapevine and recognized echoes of their own experiences. You should write about this, Maya suggested one evening as they shared dinner at Jessica's new place. Your experience, the warning signs you missed, how you fought back, it could help so many women. Jessica considered the idea. Maybe someday. Right now, I'm still processing it all. Fair enough, Maya conceded. But you have a gift for explaining complex situations clearly. The way you talked Gabriella through what to expect during her testimony, how you helped Rebecca prepare for the deposition, you're good at this. The conversation stayed with Jessica, planting a seed that would grow in the months ahead. In November, nearly a year after Jessica had overheard Ethan's phone call and discovered his betrayal, Jennifer called with unexpected news. Ethan wants to settle, she said. Full division of assets as we requested. The house proceeds split equally, and no further challenges to any claims. Jessica was suspicious. Why now? What's changed? The criminal case is proceeding, and it doesn't look good for him. His attorney in that matter has likely advised him to tie up loose ends wherever possible before trial. A contentious divorce doesn't help his image. What do you think? Jessica asked. Should we take it? Jennifer hesitated. Legally, it's a solid offer, better than we might get even with a favorable judgment, given how much money he's already hidden offshore. But, she paused, this isn't just a legal decision. Jessica, it's about what will help you move forward. Do you need your day in court? Do you need to see him admit his actions publicly? It was a question Jessica had been asking herself for months. In the beginning, she'd wanted nothing more than to see Ethan exposed, humiliated, forced to acknowledge what he'd done to her. But now, with distance and perspective, she recognized that need for what it was, a desire for a type of closure Ethan would never willingly provide. I don't need anything from him anymore. Jessica realized. The settlement is fair. Let's take it and end this chapter. The divorce was finalized 2 weeks later in a brief, anticlimactic hearing. Ethan didn't attend, sending his attorney instead. Jessica felt nothing as she signed the final papers. No regret, no satisfaction, just a quiet acknowledgement that this part of her journey was complete. Outside the courthouse, Jessica looked up at the clear December sky and took a deep breath of cold air. She was 35 years old, divorced, starting over in many ways, but she was also stronger, wiser, and free of the man who had nearly destroyed her. How does it feel to be officially Jessica Wilson again? Maya asked, using the maiden name Jessica had chosen to reclaim. Jessica smiled. Like coming home to myself. 2 years later, Jessica stood at a podium in a hotel conference room, looking out at an audience of several hundred women. Behind her, a screen displayed the title of her presentation, Recognizing the Invisible Chains, How to Identify and Escape Psychological Abuse. 4 years ago, she began, I was a successful marketing executive with a seemingly perfect marriage. 3 years ago, I was a full-time caregiver to a husband I believed was permanently disabled from a car accident. 2 years ago, I discovered that my entire reality had been carefully constructed by a man who saw me not as a partner, but as a convenience, a free maid, as he called me. Jessica paused, taking in the faces watching her intently. Some nodded in recognition. Others looked shocked. All were listening. My story is extreme in some ways, she continued. Not every abuser pretends to be paralyzed for years, but the patterns, the isolation, the gaslighting, the gradual erosion of self, those are common to all forms of psychological abuse. And they can happen to anyone, regardless of intelligence, education, or background. The presentation was the keynote address at the annual conference for Recovery and Resilience, an organization Jessica had founded 18 months earlier. What had begun as informal support for women like Gabriella had grown into a structured nonprofit providing resources, legal referrals, and peer support for survivors of psychological abuse and financial fraud. Jessica shared her story without shame or self-recrimination, identifying the red flags she'd missed and the moments when intervention might have changed her path. She explained the legal strategies that had helped her recover her assets and the therapeutic approaches that had aided her emotional healing. The hardest lesson for me, she concluded, was learning that I couldn't have fixed my marriage by trying harder, by being more understanding, by sacrificing more of myself. Some relationships can't be saved because they were never healthy to begin with. And that's not a failure on your part. It's a recognition of reality that can set you free. The applause was thunderous. As women lined up afterward to speak with her, Jessica felt the familiar mix of sorrow and purpose, that these events always evoke sorrow that so many had experienced similar betrayals, purpose in helping them find their way forward. Later that evening, Jessica joined Maya, Rebecca, and Gabriella for dinner to celebrate the conference's success. The 4 women had formed an unlikely but powerful friendship in the aftermath of Ethan's schemes. I had a call from the prosecutor today, Maya mentioned as they shared appetizers. Ethan's appeal was denied. He'll serve the full 5 years. Jessica nodded, absorbing the information without strong emotion. Ethan's conviction on multiple fraud charges had brought a certain official closure, but her personal healing had not depended on his punishment. How's the book coming? Gabriella asked, changing the subject. Slowly so, Jessica admitted. Reliving everything in detail is harder than I expected, but my editor is patient. When the book had been Maya's idea originally, but it had taken Jessica time to feel ready to share her story in such a permanent, public way. Now, with the manuscript nearly complete, she felt confident it would help others recognize and escape similar situations. I'm proud of you, Rebecca said quietly, for everything you've built from the ashes of what Ethan destroyed. Rebecca had become an unexpected ally in Jessica's work, offering insights into the family dynamics that had shaped Ethan and speaking candidly about her own experiences with his father. Her perspective added depth to Jessica's understanding of how abusive patterns could be perpetuated across generations. "I couldn't have done it without all of you," Jessica replied honestly. "Each of you showed up when it mattered most." As their dinner continued, Jessica reflected on the journey of the past 3 years. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely. There were still moments when memories ambushed her, when trust felt impossible, when anger flared at all she had lost. But those moments no longer defined her. They were just pieces of a larger story, one that now included triumph, growth, and genuine connection. Her phone buzzed with a text. It was from a woman she'd spoken with after the presentation, someone just beginning to recognize the manipulation in her own relationship. "Thank you for your story. I'm making the call to the lawyer tomorrow. I'm scared, but ready." Jessica texted back, "The first step is the hardest. Remember, you're stronger than you know. We're here when you need us." Looking up from her phone, Jessica rejoined the conversation with her friends, grateful for their presence, their support, their belief in her when she'd struggled to believe in herself. They had helped her rediscover her voice when Ethan had nearly silenced it forever. Outside the restaurant window, Chicago's lights glittered against the night sky. Jessica Wilson, no longer Carter, no longer defined by her relationship to a man who had betrayed her, raised her glass in a toast. "To freedom," she said simply, "and to helping others find theirs." 3 glasses clinked against hers in agreement, the sound crystalline and pure, like truth finally spoken aloud. 1 year later, Jessica stood in the back of a crowded courtroom, watching as another woman faced her abuser across the aisle. The woman Ellen Hayes, a soft-spoken kindergarten teacher who had endured 7 years of psychological manipulation by her husband, sat straight-backed beside her attorney, a posture Jessica recognized intimately. It was the bearing of someone determined not to be broken. No matter how difficult the path ahead, Jessica had met Ellen through recovery and resilience, guiding her through the process of documentation, legal preparation, and emotional fortification necessary for this day. Now she watched with quiet pride as Ellen testified clearly and confidently about the financial abuse, isolation, and gaslighting she had experienced. When the judge ruled in Ellen's favor, granting the restraining order and emergency financial protections she had requested, Jessica slipped out of the courtroom without approaching. This was Ellen's moment of reclamation. Jessica's role as mentor and support would continue later, but the victory belonged to Ellen alone. Outside, Jessica checked her watch. She had an hour before her next appointment, a meeting with a publisher interested in creating educational materials based on her book, which had become an unexpected bestseller after its release 6 months earlier. She decided to walk, enjoying the spring sunshine and the sense of purpose that filled her days now. At 38, Jessica Wilson had rebuilt her life into something she had never imagined during those dark years with Ethan, a life of meaning, connection, and service to others facing similar struggles. The organization she had founded now had offices in 3 cities, a staff of 12, and a volunteer network of over 200 survivors offering peer support. Her book had brought national attention to the issue of psychological abuse, leading to speaking engagements, policy consultations, and media appearances. But most meaningful to Jessica were the individual connections, the women like Ellen who found their way to freedom, one brave step at a time. In helping them, Jessica had found her own healing, transforming her trauma into a force for change. As she walked, Jessica's phone rang. Maya, calling with news about a legislative initiative they'd been supporting, a bill that would strengthen protections for victims of financial abuse and divorces. "It passed," Maya announced without preamble. "The governor's going to sign it next week. They want you to speak at the ceremony." "That's incredible," Jessica said, genuinely surprised. The bill had faced significant opposition from certain lobbying groups. "How did they get it through?" "Testimonials. The stories from your organization's members changed minds. Personal experiences are powerful. Jess, they make abstract issues real." After ending the call, Jessica found herself smiling as she continued her walk. 4 years ago, she had been a shadow in her own life, invisible even to herself. Now her voice and the voices of women like her were helping to change laws, challenge perceptions, and create pathways to safety for others. It wasn't the life she had planned. It wasn't the future she had envisioned when she'd married Ethan all those years ago, full of hope and trust and dreams of growing old together. It was better. It was real. It was hers. Jessica Wilson walked on, head high, heart open, eyes fixed on the horizon, not the past behind her, but the future she was helping to create. One story, one woman, one truth at a time. 2 months after the preliminary hearing, Jessica stood in the kitchen of her new apartment, unpacking dishes and arranging them in cabinets. The place was small, just a one-bedroom in a converted brownstone in Wicker Park, but it was hers alone, free from the memories that had saturated the house she'd shared with Ethan. The house was on the market now, part of the asset division process that was slowly grinding forward. Jennifer had advised Jessica to move out despite having legal right to stay. It's not about the legal right, she'd explained. It's about your peace of mind. As long as you're there, you're living in a space where he violated your trust. A fresh start will help you heal. Jessica had resisted at first, feeling like moving out was another victory for Ethan. But after the break-in and subsequent threatening messages, she'd finally acknowledged that Jennifer was right. No house was worth her safety or sanity. Maya leaned against the kitchen door frame, watching Jessica arrange mugs on a shelf. That one doesn't match your color scheme. Jessica glanced at the mug in her hand, a gaudy souvenir from Miami that Ethan had brought back from a business trip years ago. You're right, she said, and with deliberate satisfaction, dropped it into the trash. Maya grinned. That's my girl. Hey, did Jennifer call with the update? This morning, Hoffman proposed another settlement slightly less insulting than the first, but still nowhere near fair. Jennifer told them we're prepared to go to trial. Are you prepared for trial, Chico? Jessica placed the last of the dishes in the cabinet and closed it. I think so. It will be brutal, having everything laid bare in public. But I'm done hiding, done being ashamed of what happened to me. And she meant it. The past 2 months had been transformative. Her part-time position at Maya's firm had evolved into a full-time role with increasing responsibilities. She'd started therapy with a counselor who specialized in emotional abuse recovery. She'd reconnected with old friends who'd been pushed aside during her years with Ethan. She'd even gone on a date, just coffee. Nothing serious, but a step toward reclaiming her social life. None of it had been easy. Ethan continued his campaign of intimidation, though he was more careful now, staying just on the legal side of the restraining order. He'd contested every motion, delayed every proceeding, and used his connections to make Jessica's professional life as difficult as possible. Just last week, a potential client had backed out of a deal with Maya's firm after receiving a concerned call about Jessica's stability. But each attack only strengthened Jessica's resolve. She documented everything, forwarded each piece of evidence to Jennifer, and refused to be cowed. Diane wants to talk to you Monday morning, Maya said, changing the subject. I think she's going to offer you the marketing director position. Jessica looked up in surprise. Already, I've only been there a few months. A few months in which you've completely overhauled our social media presence, landed us coverage in 3 major legal publications, and brought in 2 significant new clients. Diane knows talent when she sees it. I don't know what to say. Say yes. You deserve it. And speaking of things you deserve, Maya reached into her bag and pulled out a bottle of champagne. I thought we should celebrate your new beginning. As they toasted in mismatched glasses, Jessica's proper stemware was still packed somewhere. Jessica felt a surge of gratitude for her friend's unwavering support. Maya had been there through the darkest moments, never doubting, never judging, simply standing beside Jessica as she fought her way back to herself. Have you heard from Rebecca? Maya asked as they moved to the small living room, settling on boxes since the furniture hadn't been delivered yet. Not since the hearing. I think she's keeping her distance. It can't be easy. Testifying against your son. Rebecca's testimony had indeed been a turning point in the preliminary hearing. Her calm recounting of Ethan's manipulations, supported by the evidence she'd provided, had clearly swayed Judge Ramirez. But the cost to Rebecca had been high. Ethan had moved out of her home immediately, cutting off all contact. According to Jennifer's sources, he'd been telling anyone who would listen that his mother was mentally declining, unable to distinguish reality from fantasy. I should call her, Jessica mused. See how she's doing. You have a big heart. You know that after everything Ethan put you through, you're still concerned about his mother. Jessica shrugged. She's a victim too, in her way, and she risked a lot to help me. Their conversation was interrupted by Jessica's phone ringing. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered, keeping her voice neutral. Hello, Jessica Carter. A woman's voice. Unfamiliar. Yes, who's this? My name is Gabriela Martinez. You don't know me, but I need your help. I'm dating a man named Ethan Carter. Jessica's heart skipped. She put the phone on speaker so Maya could hear. How did you get my number? Ms. Martinez. From a friend who works at Chicago General. I'm a nurse there. I've been seeing Ethan for about 6 weeks. He told me he was divorced, that his ex-wife had abandoned him after his accident, but something felt off. So I did some digging, found the court records of your hearing. I see, Jessica kept her voice steady. And what kind of help are you looking for? I think he's lying to me about everything, the way he moves sometimes when he thinks I'm not looking. And last week, I saw him standing in his kitchen, completely steady. When he heard me come in, he practically dove for his wheelchair. Maya and Jessica exchanged glances. Ms. Martinez. Gabriela, please. Gabriela, I can't discuss the details of my ongoing divorce proceedings, but I would strongly suggest you trust your instincts in this situation. There's more, Gabriela continued, her voice dropping. He's been asking questions about patient records, about how to access them. I think he's trying to get information about you. A chill ran down Jessica's spine. What kind of information? Medical records, psychiatric history, anything he could use to... She trailed off. To prove I'm unstable, Jessica finished for her. To support his claims in court. Yes, I'm sorry. I know this is none of my business, but when I realized what might be happening, I couldn't just say nothing. Jessica took a deep breath. No, you were right to call. Thank you. After getting Gabriela's contact information and promising to have Jennifer reach out, Jessica ended the call. She and Maya sat in stunned silence for a moment. Well, Maya said finally, that's a twist I didn't see coming. He's already found a new target, Jessica murmured, and he's still trying to destroy me. But he's getting sloppy, desperate. Maya leaned forward. This could be the break we need. If Gabriela is willing to testify about his mobility, about his attempts to access your medical records, it would cement the fraud case. Jessica nodded slowly. And possibly add witness tampering, medical privacy violations. Exactly. Let's call Jennifer. Jennifer was cautiously optimistic about this new development. If Ms. Martinez is willing to make a formal statement, it could significantly strengthen our case. But we need to be careful. Ethan could claim entrapment if we appear to be coaching her. What about her information about him trying to access medical records? Jessica asked. That seems like something the police should know about. Agreed. I'll contact the detective handling the fraud investigation and update him. In the meantime, continue documenting any contact from Ethan, no matter how small. The more evidence we have of his pattern of behavior, the stronger our position. After the call, Jessica felt a strange mix of emotions: vindication that Ethan's true nature was being revealed, concern for Gabriela, and renewed anxiety about what Ethan might do next. If he was willing to violate medical privacy laws to get dirt on her, what else might he attempt? Stay with me tonight, Maya suggested, reading Jessica's expression. We'll get Thai food, watch bad movies, and not think about Ethan Carter for a few hours. Jessica smiled gratefully. That sounds perfect. But as they left the apartment, Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had shifted. Ethan was escalating again. taking bigger risks. The end game was approaching, one way or another. The next week brought a flurry of developments. Gabriella met with Jennifer and provided a formal statement about Ethan's mobility and his inquiries about accessing medical records. The police opened an investigation into the potential privacy violations. Jessica accepted the position of marketing director at Maya's firm, complete with a substantial salary increase that gave her financial breathing room for the first time since discovering Ethan's betrayal. And then, just as things seemed to be turning in Jessica's favor, the other shoe dropped. She was at work when the call came from Jennifer. "Ethan's filed for an emergency hearing," Jennifer said without preamble. "He's claiming to have evidence that you fabricated the videos and recordings, that you've been engaged in a systematic campaign to defame him." "That's ridiculous," Jessica said. "We have multiple witnesses. Rebecca's testimony." "I know, but he's submitted some kind of evidence that he claims proves his case." "The hearing is set for Friday morning." "What kind of evidence?" "His filing is deliberately vague. It mentions digital forensic analysis and expert testimony, but doesn't provide specifics. Classic Hoffman tactic trying to catch us off guard." Jessica felt the familiar knot of anxiety forming in her stomach. "What do we do?" "We prepare for anything. I've contacted our technical expert to review all the digital evidence again, confirm its authenticity. We'll need you to come in tomorrow to go over potential questions and scenarios." After hanging up, Jessica sat at her desk, staring at the marketing plan she'd been working on before Jennifer's call. The words blurred as her mind raced through possibilities. What evidence could Ethan possibly have? The videos were genuine. The recordings were real. Rebecca's testimony had been clear and compelling. Unless... A cold thought struck Jessica. What if Ethan had somehow gotten to Rebecca? What if he'd convinced her to recant her testimony? To claim she'd been confused or manipulated? Jessica tried to push the thought away, but it persisted. Rebecca had been Ethan's most vulnerable point, his own mother testifying against him. It would make strategic sense for him to focus his efforts there. She picked up her phone and dialed Rebecca's number. No answer. She tried again an hour later. Still nothing. By the end of the day, she'd called 3 times and sent 2 text messages, all unanswered. "I'm worried about Rebecca," she told Jennifer that evening as they prepared for the hearing. "She's not responding to any of my attempts to contact her." Jennifer frowned. "That is concerning. I'll have Daniel check on her. Make sure she's all right." But Daniel's report the next day only deepened the mystery. Rebecca's house appeared empty. Her car was gone. Neighbors reported not seeing her for several days. There was no answer at her door, and mail was piling up. "She could be on vacation," Jennifer suggested, though she didn't sound convinced. Without telling anyone in the middle of all this, Jessica shook her head. "Something's wrong. I can feel it." They worked late into the night, preparing for every possible scenario the hearing might present. Jessica was exhausted by the time she arrived home, her mind spinning with legal strategies and counter-arguments. As she unlocked her apartment door, a movement in the shadows at the end of the hallway caught her eye. Jessica froze, keys in hand, adrenaline surging. "Who's there?" she called, her voice steadier than she felt. The figure stepped forward into the dim hallway light. Rebecca Carter, looking nothing like her usual polished self. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair disheveled, her face pale and drawn. "Rebecca, what are you doing here? I've been trying to reach you." "I need to talk to you," Rebecca interrupted, her voice low and urgent. "Not here, not where he might be watching." Alarm bells rang in Jessica's mind, but concern overrode caution. "Come inside. You look exhausted." Once in the apartment, Rebecca sank onto Jessica's couch, her hands trembling slightly. "I'm sorry for coming like this, but I didn't know who else to trust." "What's happened? Is it Ethan?" Rebecca nodded. "He came to see me 3 days ago, said he wanted to reconcile, that he understood why I testified against him. He seemed remorseful. I wanted to believe him." Jessica's heart sank. She could guess where this was heading. "He stayed for dinner. We talked for hours. It felt like having my son back, the real Ethan, before he became this person. Rebecca's voice broke. I woke up the next morning and he was gone. So was my laptop, my phone, and the external drive where I keep backups. The drive with copies of the evidence you gave us. Yes, and other things, personal emails, financial records, family photos, everything. Rebecca looked up, her eyes filled with fear. Jessica, there were things on that drive that could be twisted, taken out of context. Emails where I expressed doubts about Ethan's condition, but also about your reaction to it. Private thoughts that could be manipulated to sound like I wasn't sure what I was seeing. Jessica felt cold all over. You think that's the new evidence he's presenting at tomorrow's hearing? Manipulated versions of your private communications. I'm certain of it. And there's more. Last year, I consulted a neurologist about memory issues I was having, just normal aging concerns. Nothing serious, but the records could be used to suggest I'm cognitively impaired, that my testimony isn't reliable.